being recorded.
And good afternoon, everybody.
This meeting is being recorded.
It's a real pleasure to have so many of you here among us this afternoon for this webinar on blockchain standardization and the opportunities offered by BlOCKSTAND and SEEBLOCKS, which are two new EU-funded projects. We've had a very large amount of registrations for this event, probably more than we could have imagined, considering the time in the summer, which I think really testifies of the importance of these issues. So we really thank you for being here with us today. And on my end, I'm wondering who in their sane minds would rather be on holiday in the sun by the beach rather than tune in for a webinar on blockchain standardization on the 24th of July on a Monday afternoon. I think it's a big loss for them. And I hope you have a good time, you find it interesting. And if you have any questions, let us know during the course of the webinar. As Rita said, I am Alexander Choureau. I'm a tech policy officer at the European Digital SME Alliance and part of the BlOCKSTAND coordination team. Rita, as she said, is coming in from the SEEBLOCKS side and will be taking over the Q&A section of the webinar a bit later after the panelists. A few housekeeping rules, sorry, before we get going, in order for all to have a pleasurable and interactive event. First and foremost, the event will be recorded and will be made available on the blockstand.eu and seeblocks.eu websites. And regarding questions, we encourage you to ask any questions directly via the dedicated Q&A box placed in the lower toolbar. The question will then be asked to the speakers by Rita directly during the Q&A session, or will be directly answered in the chat by a member of the BlOCKSTAND and SEEBLOCKS team if it concerns a more practical question. Now, briefly introducing our speakers before I properly give the floor to them and we can get going all together. We are lucky today to have a fantastic array of speakers that you can see displayed on the screen, who all have very different perspectives and inputs on the topic today. And I warmly thank them for their presence today and for the insights they're going to share with us. So we are going to start with José Manuel Panizzo Plaza, who is an IT product officer at DG Digit of the European Commission. And José Manuel is going to share the policy priorities of the European Commission on distributed ledger technologies. We'll then have members of two of the projects. So we'll be starting with Justyna Bielowskaite, who's the Innovation Director for the European Digital SME Alliance, and who is the coordinator for BlOCKSTAND. And following her, we will have Silvana Muskela, who's CEO at Trust IT, and who is stepping in to represent SEEBLOCKS this afternoon. We'll finally end with a take by two European experts who have been very active in the field of blockchain standardization over the last years, and who will share their direct insights from the perspectives of CEOs of different blockchain-related initiatives, or from the work that they're doing directly at technical committee level. So we will have Fiona Delaney to start with, who is CEO at Origin Chain Networks, and who's also the technical working group chair for blockchain at the EU Observatory for ICT Standardization. And then finally, and last but certainly not least, we will have Ismael Arribas, who, among other things, has founded different startups in the field of blockchain, is the NetBus co-chair for Standards Committee, is the convener for the ISO Technical Committee 307 Working Group 3 on smart contracts, and is also the vice chairman of ITUT's focus group on Metaverse Working Group 2. So this is quite a panel we have today with considerable experience. And following the different speeches, we will have an interactive Q&A, which will be moderated by Rita, as I just said previously. With no further ado, I'll pass on to the speakers. So José, the floor is yours. I'll take away my screen sharing so you can put your presentation. And I think we're all very much looking forward to hearing some more about the EC's priorities in the domain. Thanks a lot, José.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alexander. I will quickly share my screen. Let me know if you can see it in a full screen mode. Can you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So many thanks all for joining in this webinar. I'm José Manuel Panizzo, working in the European Commission. And today we're going to present a proposal of different action points that should be covered by both projects. These work lines are based on the European Commission policy objectives for DLTs. They are described and included in the rolling plan for ICT standardization of the European Commission. me now. Okay. So first, it's important to mention that this list of objectives is not exhaustive, it's not final, it's not complete, it's not close. So it's just a reference for the projects. But I consider that it's useful to share as they reflect the main priorities for the European Commission in this standardization field. And also they mean a concrete proposal to focus the projects and to find the relevant expert. The first of these action points refers to the role of a DLT network like EPSI to act as a trusted infrastructure in order to manage different trust anchors from different domains, different technology stacks that will facilitate the validation of electronic proofs. The second of these proposals will include different contributions for the standardization of a DLT-based profile, the EPSI profile. This profile is describing a whole profile for the exchange of verifiable credentials, and it is including guidelines for different data format, issuance and verification processes, and also DLT-based signature that are using identifiers that are anchored in the ledger to authenticate legal entities. It is also a priority for the European Commission to contribute to the standardization of technical specifications and security standards to facilitate the recognition of DLT as a trust service in line with the requirement of the EITS regulation. And to finish, we are also suggesting a work line to contribute to the standardization of smart contract technologies, including the different business processes, security standards, among other topics that are in line with the EIDAS and the Data Act proposals. So now we are going today to focus in the first three topics. Okay, so the first topic, as it was mentioned before, this first topic is covering the role of a DLT network like EPSI to act as a trusted infrastructure in order to manage, to onboard different trust anchors from different technology stacks that the one that now we are defining EPSI. DLT as a trusted infrastructure to validate several proofs. Those that are included in the UDI wallet ARF can be taken as an example, for example, the MDL framework. And this topic should start from the current work that is done in EPSI, including the EPSI network, interfaces, identifiers, and the trust model. Okay, now let's jump to the second topic. The second of these proposals will include different contribution to the standardization of a DLT-based profile, the EPSI profile. This profile is describing a whole profile, a complete profile for the exchange of verifiable credentials. And this profile also is including DLT-based proof, DLT signature. The reason to include this task is the fact that the current HCS standards for electronic seals and signature, they are not very inclusive as they are requiring the use of 509 certificates. And this approach is preventing a distributed PKI approach based on a DLT. This action point should extend the current standards to provide more inclusive qualified seals or qualified signatures to support seals and signatures based on DLT proofs. The EPSI profile should be taken as a reference. Okay. Okay. To achieve this, we are presenting a proposal of tasks to cover in this topic. First, we will need some standardization work to design a distributed PKI certificate based on DLT proofs as a new type of certificate for eSeal and eSign. The current RFCs and ETSI standards are included FISO 9 certificates. Those that are now in place should be taken as a reference. In order to promote standards for the related processes of this distributed PKI certificate, some standardization work will be needed to define the creation and the validation processes of this DPKI certificate. These processes should take as a reference the current strategies that are defined nowadays for the time being in EPSI, in the EPSI project, to offer validation services based on DLT. In order to facilitate the interoperability of validation services, it will be needed also to standardize the interfaces provided to validate DLT-based proofs, represented, for example, by JWS signatures. Okay, a proposal of task for this topic could also include the standardization of processes to create electronic seals based on DLT proofs, and also the validation processes for these electronic seals and signatures based on distributed PKI. And it was mentioned before, some signature standards like JADES or CBOR ADES are included in this moment 509 references. So change requests to these standards to be more inclusive and to support DLT proofs could be also included in this topic. And just to finish this topic, a couple of different tasks that could be acceptable. First, the standardization of the EPSI trust model, including accreditations aligned with multiple domains, taxonomies, and identifiers, in order to define different standards for trusted lists based on DLT, and also the standardization of a reference architecture model to consider DLT as a service to support trust framework for attestations. Now let's jump to the third section. The last topic that we are introducing today as part of the task covered by these projects is the recognition of a DLT as a trust service. As you probably know, the Council Presidency and the European Parliament reached a provisional agreement to include ledgers as a new trust service. A task in this topic could include the different standardization work to contribute to the definition of electronic ledgers as a trust service, following the final text of the proposal to amend the IDES regulation. This can include technical specifications, cybersecurity standards. This work should be aligned with other relevant projects, for example, the project EPSI-NE, to test and evaluate in practice these standards if needed. So that's everything from my side. I will pass the floor to my colleagues to continue the presentation today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jose, for this policy perspective, and I'm sure there'll be many questions at the end during the Q&A on some of the points that you raised. You directly mentioned the two projects, and I think this is a perfect transition towards the next part of the webinar, which is to know a bit more about the scope of the projects. What are going to be the outputs? How is the funding going to work? All of these questions, which I'm sure many of you are interested in, which is why I'm now going to turn to Justina, who is Innovation Director at the European Digital SME Alliance and the coordinator for BlOCKSTAND. So Justina, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thanks to you, Alex. Let me just quickly share my screen. Could you confirm that you see it well? Yeah, yes, I hope you do. Perfect. So thank you very much for passing the floor. And indeed, once again, welcome everyone to our today's webinar, which is my pleasure to do here together with SEEBLOCKS. We both have very similar projects since we clearly together answered to the same call. So not be surprised that we probably do have a bit similar objectives and ideas of what we're going to do. But nevertheless, I would like to present how we approach the topic from our BlOCKSTAND consortium point of view. So in BlOCKSTAND consortium, we have 4 partners. Us, European Digital SME Alliance, which is a network of European ICT SMEs. INADBA, which also Ismail will speak a little bit about, but it's International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications. We have Small Business Standards that represents SMEs in standardization, and UNINFO, which is a standardization body in Italy. So altogether, our 4 partners came to basically fulfill the 3 objectives that we have put through for our project. So first of all, of course, we hope to support the implementation of the rolling plan in 2 ways. So in one way, we are supporting implementation of what has already been written in the rolling plan for ST standardization, and specifically on the chapter for DLT technologies and blockchain. For example, now we are, of course, following the priorities of the one for 2023. And on the other hand, we are also contributing to writing the chapters for the following years based on the needs that we observe from our blockchain community. Then, as the second objective, we want to reinforce the link and support the needs of European blockchain services infrastructure and European blockchain partnership. And for that, we also have very close collaboration with the stakeholders there to identify their needs and to be able to voice them and to answer them in different ways through our project. And here, this third objective is very linked to the first one and second one. We also tend to support the European experts in blockchain standardization. So we will provide a place for them to discuss, to understand how their technical ideas and technical work that we do could answer the needs out there in Europe, coming from industry, coming from EPSI and other stakeholders, and how all the standardization work can actually also help these experts to support the European objectives, policy priorities, and so on. In addition to that, there will also be an expert selection process and some lump sums provided to the experts that we will also present in the next slides. So what in practice we're going to deliver, because we have, of course, beautiful objectives, but how this looks in practice. In practice, we have BlOCKSTAND EU, which is currently at the beta version. So now it's just a simple very, very basic website, which in the next 2 months till the end of September will develop into web-based blockchain standardization facility and community tool that will host a number of very, very important outputs. So first of all, of course, the community tool, and with the community, we will also include our executive management board that are the external experts guiding and providing support to our project, as well as generally standardization experts interested in blockchain. Then we will also produce some of the key outputs and key deliverables of the project that will all be hosted in our blockchain standardization facility. So that will include a report on blockchain inclusion to the rolling plan and the implementation of blockchain priorities from the rolling plan. We will have expert selection process, and we will speak a bit more about it just in a couple of minutes. We will have a repository of blockchain standardization activities, so anything ongoing on the European and even more importantly, international domain, what is related to blockchain standardization. These activities will be mapped and provided in our facility. We will have standardization gaps and recommendations, so really coming from technical perspective and coming from work of technical experts, and also European blockchain standardization roadmap, linking with technical priorities and recommendations to rather wider policy approach. And of course, we will present towards the end of our projects the success stories from our experts, so really the outlook of European success stories of how our experts can contribute to these processes. And you will get a little sneak peeks later today from Fiona and from Ismail as well on how they are seeing this and how they are successfully working on standards. So as such, we give opportunity for BlOCKSTAND, but also SEEBLOCKS project to other experts also do great work, as both Fiona and Ismail are doing. And here is how. As of next week, in BlOCKSTAND project, we will launch expert selection process, which is a continuous and open process, meaning it will run for more than 18 months, more or less 18 months. And at any time, interested experts will be able to apply. And out of this, we will select at least 30 to 40 experts, and we plan to have around 100 contributions from experts. that will be supported through the project. And these contributions can be technical reports or small research studies, maybe new work items proposed in standardization work, maybe active interactions, participation, and specific contributions to work in technical committee and other standardization activities that experts can offer. They can be short-term or long-term. So in short-term contributions, it should last not too many months, and it should have one clear output. For long-term contributions, since we last longer, it should be 2 to 3 different outputs offered. The expert selection will be very simple. So as mentioned, experts will be able to submit proposals online, filling in a very easy form on our blockstand.eu website. And basically, we will have cutoff dates that you will see in the next slide. And upon each cutoff date, we will see who and what kind of applications were submitted through the past couple of months. And if there are new applications, we will evaluate them immediately. As such, we hope that the process will be very dynamic and will be able to answer the needs that are constantly changing in blockchain environment. So in submission, after the proposal of the expert is submitted, we will evaluate, of course, if the proposal is eligible. And then if that's eligible, we will assess the quality of the proposal. And if it passes the threshold, it passes to the next stage where we will try to see how much the proposal addresses different priorities. And if the scoring is very high on different priorities, the expert will be selected for BlOCKSTAND support. If not, expert will be notified that proposal is good, but contributions are put on hold. We do that because we have many cutoff dates, and likely we would like to give opportunity for experts to also suggest their ideas not only this month or next month, but also towards the end of the project 1 year later. So for this, those experts that have very good proposals, but perhaps we address the priorities that maybe not the top priority today, but could become much more actual maybe tomorrow, or if there are no proposals that suggest the top priorities today, then maybe towards the end of the project, if we see that we have opportunities, we could also support those that were put on hold. So the criteria, I will not get into details since they will all be published as of next week in BlOCKSTAND website. But of course, there are 3 main criteria for eligibility. So we look for experts that are affiliated to European bodies. We look for experts that have not proposed yet more than 3 contributions. And for the experts that have not proposed the same contributions to other activities funded by the EU, for example, for SEEBLOCKS. So basically, same expert can apply to both, but same expert cannot propose the same work for both of the projects. Then we will, of course, assess excellence in of implementation. So we will look at experience of the expert, knowledge of the subject, timeline wherever the proposed actions are feasible and in line with the timeline, and then of course the impact of expert contributions. After this is assessed, and threshold of 4 points are reached for both. As mentioned before, we will grade all the proposals based on different priorities. So here is a list of them. We will, of course, try to ensure that there is gender balance, that experts consider environmental impact of standardization work we are doing, that variety of different standardization needs are addressed, participation in different SDOs or technical committees are also addressed, and so on. Now with cutoff dates. So as mentioned, we hope to open the selection as of next week, and then we will have selection dates, cutoff dates more or less every 2 months. So meaning we will look at the proposals received within those 2 months, and we will be able, through this, provide a very quick response to the experts, and also ensure that process is very dynamic. So whenever experts see that there is some change in priorities in the ongoing work, where there are any innovation developments happening in blockchain scene, so we will be able to ensure that these are not missed somehow by waiting for half a year until the application open, but expert, once one has an idea, can immediately suggest it to us, and a couple of months later can start working on that. So quite many cutoff dates, but we definitely encourage experts to start thinking of it as of the beginning and try to apply maybe even more than once. So that's briefly it. If there are any questions, I will be very happy to address. And just to say, we launched, as of now, our social media channels. You can see we are very new, and the first information we have there is exactly about this webinar. So we will be very, very happy if you give some love to our channels and you follow us, and then definitely you will not miss the opportunity to hear about the launch of the expert selection. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Justina. And before passing over to Silvana, who's CEO at Trust IT and who's going to present about SEEBLOCKS, just a quick reminder that any questions can be directed directly in the Q&A section and will then be raised during the Q&A panel by my colleague Rita from SEEBLOCKS. With this small reminder aside, Silvana, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Lovely, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
you see
all
the
good.
slides as well? That's lovely. Okay, so thank you very much. We're thrilled to be involved in two CSAs. Indeed, as Justina mentioned, have very well the same objectives clearly as both proposals were funded. So we should really call this, double the opportunity all the time for all experts who are working around blockchain and DLT. You get opportunities both in BlOCKSTAND as well as in SEEBLOCKS. So they're short projects, both of them, with a duration of 24 months. So it really is great to have a consolidated group of people who can take forward the effort and objectives that you've already heard. So I won't repeat it. I'll just show a few slides here for SEEBLOCKS. Some of you might, I'm actually not the coordinator for SEEBLOCKS. So thanks for the intro, Alex. I'm the CEO of Trust IT, but I'm actually stepping in for John Favaro, who's a senior analyst here at Trust IT, who's the official coordinator for SEEBLOCKS. We're very much involved, myself and other colleagues, on other initiatives you might be familiar with, like Stand ICT, where both Ishmael and Fiona have been regular fellows who've received funding through the Stand ICT initiative. So now that there's an opportunity through BlOCKSTAND and SEEBLOCKS, clearly we would want the applications to come in through these specific dedicated projects. So moving forward with the slides, tell me if they come through. You have it in a nutshell. SEEBLOCKS is made up of a very lean structure of consortia. There's our organization with our affiliate entity Compla, plus DCU, who manage the selection and engagement of the experts. And DCU are also a part of other projects as they organize the YOS, the European Standardization Observatory, as part of Stand ICT, and there are linkages with another CSA called HS Booster that provides standardization support services to all Horizon Europe and H2020 projects. So there's a nice connection with different projects running through. Then we have Fraunhofer with the interface of Knut Blind specifically, and his team, who work specifically around the educational parts of standardization efforts and look to the impact monitoring and road mapping. So lots of acronyms here and lots of numbers that I'm not going to go into the details of. Perhaps differentiating with maybe BlOCKSTAND is that we have technical working groups, where you see the TWG as an acronym. This is something that we picked up and carried forward from Stand ICT, which is quite effective, of a different set of landscape and gap analysis reports. What's important, I think, it is to say is, despite the two proposals, they are two projects, BlOCKSTAND and SEEBLOCKS, but on many occasions, we're going to be trying to maximize the effort and resources and impact to make sure that we don't produce double or siloed efforts, but where we can work together, we will look already with this webinar, but also in terms of road mapping or contributions to the chapter, the ICT rolling plan, being on similar boards together will ensure that there's an inclusive dialogue and the communication is extremely open and transparent, and we help each other where possible. So SEEBLOCKS has €300,000 assigned for experts who apply through the SSP, we call them, so the selection and support procedure that looks to support around 40 European experts in total. We also have, in addition to the partners, Fiona Delaney, we're delighted that she's also on this webinar, who's the domain expert here, who is the CEO of Origin Chains founder. You'll be hearing from her shortly. So if we move on, some key outputs. So we've said already about the money earmarked for the experts contributing to blockchain and DLT standardization efforts. There will also be here clearly a contribution to 100+ standardization documents. There's the establishment of a permanent task force, a PTP, in collaboration with the European blockchain players so that we ensure a coordinated approach on the European and international scene. I mentioned the technical working groups, which we started up under StandICT. You might be familiar with some of these reports that are downloadable already on Zenodo, and there was a specific one that both Ishmael and Fiona are chair and co-chair of within the remit of StandICT that clearly then pushes over under the remit of SEEBLOCKS, which we're happy that that work is going to be continued going forward. And perhaps the novelty for SEEBLOCKS is that there's a standards visualization tool to foster education and capacity building. We're hoping that all the standardization are fueled into the YOS of StandICT, so we don't create multiple repositories in Europe. I think it's important that this effort is also streamlined. So some key dates. There's the evaluators. You have the opportunity to become an evaluator. And this, there's an application already online, and the deadline for this is the 29th of September, 2023. So we do look forward to receiving lots of applications in this domain, because we need expert people who evaluate clearly the specific support procedure applications that are coming in. And then, so that's one date to remember. The deadline for this is the 29th of September, so you have some time. Instead, if you are looking for funding, any initiative you are working on in this domain, then the date for opening comes later than BlOCKSTAND, so that's good, because you've got a continued effort coming in from either one project or the other. And our opening is actually the 24th of August, so more or less within a month's time, closing around the 26th of September. So there are 4 of these engagement and selecting procedure opportunities that will come out over the 24 months, and they'll usually stay open for 1 month maximum. And this is where I'll stop. Do follow us on the social media channels that have been communicated here, and we'll be happy to take any questions offline. And we look forward to seeing so many of you already on this webinar, considering we're in the heavy hot month of July, and I wish you happy holidays. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Alex. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Silvana. And on behalf of the BlOCKSTAND Consortium, I can certainly say that we look forward to cooperating with SEEBLOCKS along the upcoming months. And I think this first webinar was a good first step that announces some future good streams of collaboration. We're now going to head into the last part of the panels and turn to 2 experts who've been extremely active in the field of blockchain standardization in the last years. The first one of them is Fiona Delaney, who I introduced earlier. So Fiona, whenever you're ready, you can get going.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. I think I'll be booting you off here, Silvana. Great. So I'm Fiona Delaney. I'm working with the SEEBLOCKS initiative. And just to give a little background to myself, I'm a blockchain architect. I'm a software engineer, founder of an Irish agri-tech firm called Origin Chain Networks. And I'm co-chair of Blockchain Ireland Startups and Web3 Working Group, as well as, of course, a co-chair at UOS with my colleague Ishmael. this is a really important moment, I think, in European standardization. Embracing these two projects like this really provides an opportunity to accelerate participation by researchers, by industry participants, and business leaders in really establishing the groundwork for innovation as we move forward into the, this next phase, I suppose, of the Internet of Value, blockchains, DLTs, digital infrastructure, harmonized digital infrastructure, whether that's in the European context or even globally. We think of course, policy terms, we think of the European project. But if you're working in technology, you think about the global digital marketplace, you think about technical interoperability without borders, really, because that's how we kind of build it. So it's very important and interesting to see these competing emphases and how to participate and contribute from your own point of view. So I guess from my point of view, I have a startup. I'm a technical person, a technical builder. What are the things that I'm seeing, or the companies that I work with, what are they seeing at the coalface of industry, and how does standardization, whether it's technical standardization or business type standardization, something like the EIDAS initiative, preparing for business interoperability through digital means, and how that can accelerate society, trade, business, and enhance connectedness in Europe and outside. So with that in mind, my presentation is quite high level, and it's this moment in time where I get to explore what can these two projects, and in particular the SEEBLOCKS project, mean for creating a pathway to transparency and trust in trade. And I think it's super important to see this, first of all, as a moment to champion European innovation through emerging standards, and really highlighting the coherence and quality of research and open contributions to the open standards realm. And we're very strong on that. I think that this is hybridized, I suppose, from the rolling plan, state of the art in blockchain and DLT. We're looking at a context of massive technical convergence. We have requirements like trusted information and decentralized identities. We're facilitating the tokenization of data and new types of assets, virtual assets and real world assets. We're utilizing capabilities like digital twin, trustless, permissionless, anonymous and privacy protecting infrastructures. We're looking and utilizing at big theories and thinking to help us to deal with just the sheer volume and numbers of people interacting on digital infrastructures. We're using things like game theory to model, predict, and combat malfeasance or criminal behavior, or even just unwanted behaviors that are disruptive to business process. Cybersecurity is the ever-growing, never-ending requirement domain. And then we're looking at the context of cloud, edge, fog, 5G, moving then into things like smart energy, energy efficiency, sharing resources, all that kind of thing, and what that means for us as a society and for us in industry and business. So how do we translate that into what we're looking for in standardization projects? So for the SEEBLOCKS project, we've focused particularly on the strengths and key features that DLT and blockchains bring. So we're looking at identity management, so self-sovereignty, privacy, anonymity, account abstraction, looking at maybe secure wallet management. There's a whole load of things that are massive requirements for users in our sector, that there might be some contributions there that could be relevant. We're looking at as well at data provenance, on-chain, off-chain data flows, data trustworthiness, verifiable oracle services, registries, trust anchors, all of the stuff that we've already been talking about, particularly from Jose. Governance, really interesting domain. Stakeholder reputation, roles, rights, and responsibilities. Looking at online voting and why you would do that. Decentralized autonomous organizations, peer-to-peer virtual communities, and then transitioning that from small niche communities online into a wider, interoperable and transparent, trusted format or infrastructure for global trade and global cooperation, social cooperation. Then, of course, we've got the exciting domain of token and asset creation and exchange. We've got cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, the emergence of digital currencies, which are not necessarily digital ledger based, virtual assets, fungible and non-fungible tokens, exchange protocols. There's a whole wealth of new information there, and innovation imperatives, I think, that we are discovering in the market or are timely with new regulated spaces in the market, that something like standardization in this realm could be really helpful. Process optimization, one of my bear bugs, transparency, multi-party, interoperable, cloud-based resource sharing, mobile edge computing, energy efficiency. Now we have, people used to say terrible things, and many of them were true about blockchains and proof of work. And now we have the almost ubiquitous and constant use of neural networks for fun, for all these different kinds of things. And we, energy efficiency and energy resource sharing is becoming an important imperative for the digital infrastructure, both now and into the future. Extending that, we've got automation, smart contracts, the concepts around intelligent agency, robotics, automation, and there are standards that may be useful there, that might come out of that. And I know my colleague Ishmael is probably going to have a lot more to say, certainly on the smart contracts point of view. Cybersecurity, I already mentioned. And then lastly, use cases. Use cases and a formalized way of collecting use cases that makes them able to be visible, discoverable, and comparable, even across different industry domains or sectoral domains, is really important. And I know that the work that we've done at ISO and even at SENELEC, looking at gathering European interest use cases where DLTs are considered and utilized for European citizens, and how that data can be managed or protected, or how business across European and extra-European borders can be facilitated in a way that meets regulated requirements within the bounds of Europe and the European project. So that gathering of use cases and documenting them in a way that they become valuable and readable across multiple domains is a really important part of some of the work that we would like to enable during the course of the project. So trade facilitation, interoperability, there's a whole host of organizations and ecosystems, and internationalization. The whole European project is de facto international. And it's very important to see us cooperate together, but also to look outside of the boundaries of the European project and engage with, as many of those SDOs do, the standardization development organizations like ISO, ITU, the UN, IEEE, as well as our own SENELEC, ETSI, and so on. Because through that kind of cooperation and collaboration, we are able to provide insights and frameworks to enable the integration of interoperable business services. It's really, really important. And I noticed one of the questions earlier on in the chat, which I tried to answer, neither SEEBLOCKS nor BlOCKSTAND can override the working methods of those SDOs. Those SDOs are standalone. They have their own business models and they have their own practice. However, if a researcher, if a startup, an innovator, an entrepreneur wishes to put forward a new contribution towards a standard in any of those SDOs, that's something that we'd look at, helping to support that process, maybe by making a contribution to their time or to some research. So it's not that these projects can bypass or should bypass those existing consensus mechanisms or decision-taking mechanisms, but rather it supports the individual experts to contribute to those wider and longer standing important organizations' work. I've mentioned here some of the civil society entities, and I include the European project DGs here, Connect, Digit, Grow. They're policy focused, the Chase project, and various different NGOs. Because it's so important to connect these are expert organizations and expert networks, which together enhance this ecosystem of progress and innovation that I firmly believe we have here. And European standards through multifaceted ecosystem support and engagement is a key to what can be the European success into the near future. So what are some of the issues that are not just European specific, but they are global issues that we can see that standardization and also DLTs, ledgers, trust anchors, sources of truth, the immutability imperative, tokenizing and virtualizing important data, things like protecting the oceans or understanding new knowledge around the world and the planet that we live on, and how to share that and make it accessible to other experts and other researchers in a way that we can trust, that are helping us to tackle climate change and to protect the entire planet that we live on. Startups, ecosystems, and the marketplace. This is from a survey I did with Blockchain Ireland, who are those early adoptive expert ecosystems in blockchain and DLT. They are highly educated, most often post-grad. They're fully employed and overemployed, a bit like me. I have a startup. I'm the chairperson of Blockchain Ireland's startups group. I'm participating in this project here. So they're very, very motivated, innovative, early adoptive types. And there's how do we connect, support, and create coherence and cooperation for this community, I think is the challenge for certainly that's part of the challenge that I see for SEEBLOCKS. And I'm very much looking forward to working with all of the innovators, the founders, the researchers, and those contributors to open standards who will be coming forward through the project. So yeah, EU innovation and emerging standards, SEEBLOCKS and BlOCKSTAND, and the European Commission offers a pathway to transparency and trust in trade with blockchain, the EU digital infrastructure, ecosystem innovation, and embracing new market discovery in physical, hybrid, and virtual domains. I think that's what we're all doing here together. So yeah, thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks a lot, Fiona. That was very insightful, and I think we're all very happy and very lucky to have you overemployed at the moment for all the efforts you're doing for the blockchain community in Europe. So we're coming now to the last speaker before the Q&A with all the panelists, and any other questions that have not been answered yet can be asked at that moment. So we now have Ismael Arribas, who is going to present his own insights. Ismael, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And let's go. I will be jumping to different spaces. I will send the two presentations I will support to the organization for all of our warm attendees in this summer. Let me show you very quick the first thing. Could you see in ATBA which is the International Association Trusted Blockchain for blockchain application, right?
Yeah,
Could you?
we can see it. Thanks.
Okay. So in ATBA, our company is a small and medium enterprise. Indeed, it's a micro enterprise. I will explain later on a little bit about us, but indeed, we are co-founding members. So it's a very inclusive initiative that we joined in 2019 at the kickoff. And really, nowadays we have 5 working groups proactively working in our community, and our standard committee that I am very happy to co-chair with Luke, who is indeed leader in one of our projects in the standardization committee, because it's a very transversal committee. And one of the projects that we are doing is to map de facto and de jure and try to converge the understanding and the standardization efforts between these two spaces so complex to harmonize sometimes, and could be useful for the industry and from the open source community that are watching for standards in blockchain and DLT space. The other action that we are doing in ATBA, in the standardization committee, is to activate proactively the liaisons. We have a liaison statement with ISO TC307, and we are also in liaison with ITUT, in particular with the multimedia study group system in the question 22 related to DLT services. And also we are starting to understand the huge potential of the focus group in ITUT about metaverse. Further to the working groups, sorry for this, in ATBA, we have also advisory bodies. We have a governmental advisory body, and we have also an academic advisory body. These help us as small and medium enterprises, large companies, associations, and other entities in the industry to understand the geopolitics. So allow the standardization committee to harmonize also this aspect. Just very quick, if you want to see. Some of our governmental advisory members are Abu Dhabi Global Market Authority, the Banco Nacional de Investimento, Emirates Post Group, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Commission, who is also co-founding member of INATBA, the European Investment Bank. Well, there are interesting actors that allow us to understand also this angle and receive their advices and a dialogue with us in this. Let's go now to the action in regards of the presentation. Can you see right now this PowerPoint about the Web3 Festival in Hong Kong that I was honored to be one of the keynote by the organization and IEEE?
Yes,
could you see?
Perfectly.
Okay. I started in that keynote by saying why I consider I was there. As I said before, my sister and I launched a compliance firm in 2006 that was a very complex war indeed in Spain, but globally. And we were luckily meeting thanks to the cybersecurity efforts that we were exploring for the files that we registered with physical stamps, 2 physical stamps that were rotated based on different risks over the document or issues. So we started the digitalization. And in 2016, the Spanish national body called different actors for the blockchain potential technical committee that was launched by ISO, and boom, that changed a lot the spectrum of our understanding as independent compliance and opportunity to go to market. We started entrepreneurship. I will give some perspectives, but in 2016, we received one award from one of our company, a new company, which is called Lumiversity. And in 2019, INATBA gave these attributes I told you, and is given to all our community. Furthermore, in contributing with this standardization development organization. Well, in that meeting, I introduced various things, but let me go to this angle, because the national standards bodies do not write standards. The stakeholders committees do. So there are this diversity that is needed in the standardization efforts. That's why it makes sense cooperation and collaboration with a multi-diverse knowledge, let's say. Well, I will go very quick. One of our experiences is to practice this recommendation, which is the aim of the interoperability, which is the ability of two or more systems or applications to exchange information and to mutually use the information that have been exchanged. Everywhere you could go, not only in the blockchain space, in other information technology and telecommunication technology, you will find that this is a harmonized understanding. And in the question 22 that I mentioned before in the study group for multimedia, this is a clear approach whereby there is an standards for the DLT platform, and there are standards also for enabling digital economy, product or services, digital one. What happened with us nowadays, and that will serve to you to know that thanks to the standardization efforts and the commitment of our main company in 2006, as I said before, Kungfood, as compliance, we transform in a techno-compliance in an independent way. And we are committed as convener in my national body with a rule for digital evidence for the magistrates and the jurisdictional entities. I am currently the convener of the working group 3 for smart contracts. I will show after this very quick what was the plenary presentation I gave in these regards in Nicosia. I am liaison officer for these two technical committees in ISO. The 292 is the security and resilience, and I am rapporteur in ISG-PDL, where on behalf of what Jose Manuel mentioned today, with the efforts of the EBSI, there is it is an industrial specification group. It's very particular what is the offer from this group, but is doing right now two interesting documents. One of them is in regards of the applicability of the qualification for a PDL to be a trust service. It was mentioned today, and the other is the interaction between smart contracts and Oracle. I am co-chair for the standards committee. As I said, we look within INATBA, liaison officer between these two standardization committees, which probably could be very useful in the projects, and the liaison I mentioned, and the vice chairman. But the most important thing is that we were able to go to market and set up 3 new enterprises thanks to the standardization understanding. For instance, in the use cases that we have, the data flow model was provided as a contribution to the working group 6 in TC307. Another of our company is piloting in the EBSI, which is Chrome World, which also spent like 6 months in an open and global for anyone in the community and industry proof of concept in this is HCI SGPDL. And well, what we understand was that basically after all this journey, and starting from the Spanish in Kronos and the EBSI attention, we have this global community. And one of our company, it is indeed not a company, it's an entity, it's a DAO, it's a Blue Future organization. We are pushing strongly time ago to the European Commission for the blue economy. And nowadays we are one of the multi-stakeholders with a very particular commitment, thanks to a surrogacy based on the DAO, whereby we have two positions to help in the EU for Algae, a stakeholder platform, but we are going globally as well, participating in the Metaverse Standards Forum and Blockchain. Well, that could serve to you to see how impacted in our company, who was a company at the beginning of just a compliance, transforming into techno-compliance. Could you see the University of Nicosia right now in your screen? I think so.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I will be very quick because I love the dialogue afterwards and I stress the points that we need to tackle in this particular project. In Nicosia, thanks to the University of Nicosia and the Standardization Developing Organization of Nicosia, we had the plenary of ISO TC 307. I explained how we understand these heterogeneous networks and how indeed the standardization we see as an enabler. There are a piece of mandatory, which is law, and a voluntary angle, which is the standardization efforts. Both of them, if they combine, make love. I think we reach this performance in the blockchain industrialization. And I will not enter too far in the technology side, but I explain very quickly that from the smart contracts point of view, there are circumstances that happen in the heart of the blockchain. There are others that happen on the blockchain that are business products and digital services, as mentioned before. And there are others that activate the scale up and privacy protections and other kind of circumstances that we are learning, which happen thanks to smart contracts as an enabler. Well, I entered to explain a simplistic approach of what happened in the real terms when we sign an agreement is bilateral and bidirectional, the circumstances between the subjects. And with the smart contracts enter into force some objects like could be a blockchain as a trust service mentioned before. This presentation will be for you it's also very technical, these two slides, and not appropriate, I think, to go further here, but I will be yours for any questions after you get the presentation and discuss and open. In INATBA, we want to cooperate, and we are really internationally doing it. So that could be the perspective we offer. With this versatile commitment I have indeed as professional in standardization efforts. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ismael. And I think this really shows the wide extent of activities that can be done when becoming an expert in blockchain standardization. And I think it's definitely a good publicity for anybody that wants to get engaged in the field. So we're coming to the end of the panelists. So once again, I want to take the opportunity to thank you all for taking the time today and for sharing your insights. And I think it shows that there's maybe different shapes and different means in which efforts are being done in terms of blockchain standardization in Europe. I'm now going to pass the floor to my colleague Rita from SEEBLOCKS for a short Q&A. We're running a bit out of time, but we'll have time to take a few questions. I've mentioned it at the beginning. If you have a question, please direct it in the Q&A box, and then Rita can pick it up and submit it to the speakers if it hasn't been answered beforehand in the chat by somebody else of the team. Thank you very much. And Rita, giving over to you.
Hello, thank you, Alexander. Thank you to all the panelists who are here with us today. I would like maybe to invite the panelists to turn off their cameras because now we just arrived to the questions and answers moments. And I have to say I'm very happy to see all the exchange, the messages we saw in the chat, and also the questions that in the meantime you posed to the speakers, and our speakers were very kind to reply in the meantime. I'm very happy with that, and thank you for this. I think to start this question and answer session, I see a hand raised by one of the audience. His name is Adolfo Ibanez.
Moknus. I hope I pronounced your name properly. So I'll give you permission to talk, Adolf. So I'm going to give you, I think your micro is on, so feel free to pose your question.
Hello, good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yes, I am an entrepreneur here in Spain, based here in Spain with a startup in Valencia. And I'm wanting to ask about the infrastructure that the project is going to provide to the people that want to apply to the seed block. For example, it will be possible for us to make a case study over using your structure to access for blockchain, or how is it going to be for the applicants to be able to work with the BlOCKSTAND or SEEBLOCK platforms?
I think maybe Silvana could pass.
Yeah.
Silvana.
I'll start, and maybe I'll start with the answer, and then maybe my colleagues from BlOCKSTAND. So hi, Adolfo.
Hi.
Good to have you with us, and I hope your business is thriving. So when you talk about infrastructure, do you mean if you want to obtain financial support, how do I go about this?
Not only financial support, but also orientation, and maybe able to use some existing blockchains or access to public blockchains. I don't know how it will work, in how it has been thought about. How do applicants are going to be able to use for a case study like a sandbox? I mean, for using blockchain as a sandbox, maybe.
Okay, so the two CSAs, Adolfo, are facilitator projects. So we wouldn't be the infrastructure that provides this sandbox for you.
Perfect.
That we wouldn't be that tool. Others would provide that. We are the facilitator projects that allow you, expert, who can carry out some of the work that you want to do through these applications of where you're saying, I'm doing an activity, I'm working with ISO or one of the standardization bodies, or even in APA, and I'm currently working on this. I need financial support to actually create A, B, or C, and your application is evaluated like in this existence. I'm probably not explaining myself well. The application itself is to ensure that you're engaging and taking forward European excellence around DLT and blockchain in any of the ESOs or global SDOs. So that's the first step that you would need to make to then get engaged in the project. Then your application is evaluated on the criteria that both BlOCKSTAND and SEEBLOCKS have that you will find online. But the content of your application can be absolutely anything. If your end result is to then have a type of sandbox or prototyping exercise, but that would come along the way. That isn't something that the projects would be creating. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, you answered. Thank you very much, Silvana.
You're welcome, Adolfo.
Perhaps I can also add very quickly. Thank you very much, Silvana. I think it's a very good and right explanation indeed for both projects. But since we will have community, if Adolfo, you are still looking for advice or anyone who could provide the sandbox, and you have any specific ideas, and you know exactly what type of support you need from technical perspective, I'm sure we might have experts who could give you a hint where to look or which projects otherwise could help you from technical side, since we have this community around us. So I'm sure that somebody could perhaps help you to find it, and then you could apply once you have both pieces of puzzle in place.
Yes. Thank you very much, Justina, because we have a great problem with case studying projects with blockchain related to culture and heritage, because normally city council or museums don't have the knowledge or the understanding about what can be done with blockchain related to heritage preservation. Thank you very much, Justina.
Could I intervene a second? Thank you, Justina. I was also looking at the chat before. There was Caroline who was talking about some specific use cases, and also maybe Fiona and Ishmael would like to add something to the point Adolfo's making with your experience in the past, and Caroline too, and other people who've applied. Can you maybe give a couple of insights also to Adolfo, do you think?
Will I jump in there? Hi, Adolfo. It's lovely to hear from you, and I can hear the pain in your voice. You're right, and in the middle of it, I can hear that. And I definitely, as somebody with a startup myself, I got involved in standardization work, probably a little bit similarly to Ishmael, because helping to create a common understanding and awareness around the capabilities and trustworthiness of this type of technology is just key to accelerating its utility in business infrastructure, either nationally or wider in the single digital marketplace, and of course beyond. So speaking about heritage and culture and those specific applications, I know that Ishmael is probably going to start talking about the metaverse now in a second, but we're talking here about devices, connectivity, and all sorts of kinds of standards that your business piece, which is like a slice of a pizza, is connecting into. In terms of what your company or your innovation might contribute or provide in a standards context, is if you're looking at a very, very emerging domain, and I think IoT or devices, yes, in heritage is an important context, which in the metaverse and tourism and the metaverse, for example, you also have the Persist project, which is an digital archive project for heritage, human heritage projects from a different point of view. These are really, really important aspects, and the how and why of how we come together, and the bottleneck of decision makers. This is not just in heritage, this is in business all the time. What do business decision takers know and understand, and who do they trust? So they don't always trust startups. They don't always trust the junior researchers or developers in their company. We need this context of industry provided standards to help move the dial and move the conversation. So I would be really keen. Please do reach out to me on LinkedIn or something. I would love to hear more about your project, and maybe if you wanted to help you formulate it into a use case for ISO or for SEN or something like that, which you could submit regardless of whether or not you get funding through these projects. But the good news is you can apply through these projects as well to help you for your time, because putting something into a format which is, there was some discussion in the chat earlier on, and it was about ISO or ITU or any of the SDOs. They have their working methods, and their methods are frameworks, and they're very strong, and it can take a minute or two or even a year to get used to how these things work and how standards are collaborative, cooperative, they are international, and they take quite a bit of time to get put into place and agreed. But it is the process that is just to
evangelize people.
I know that's what you want to do. Yeah. And the other people, the policy people, want to evangelize you as well.
I will love to implement it as a social policy for B2G, for an innovative management of heritage. Obviously, the public heritage of cities.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That coming together with smart cities, there's a lot of very interesting pieces
through
there.
Blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Silvana, Fiona, Justine, and all of you and also Adolfo for the questions and for replying. And in fact, we are already a couple of minutes over the closing time of the webinar. So I believe we have time for just one last question. And in this case, if you all may, I'd like to pose one for José Plaza. So I think it's also interesting to know your inputs in this regard. So to provide some context to the question I like to pose. So many of you may be aware that last June, there was an announcement that by the end of next year, 2024, there would be a new European body that would be created with the task to, let's say, oversee the development and the deployment of blockchain, also the European Infrastructure Consortium on blockchain and so on. And I believe the goal of this is to kind of scale up the efforts to compete with other large blockchain initiatives that exist in South America and China and so on. So being aware of this, my question, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this, Jose, would be how this context is going to interplay with the EPSI's current activities. And besides this, what will be the main changes compared to what EPSI is doing at this moment?
Okay, thank you, Rita. So what I can say regarding the EDIC today? I mean, there is an application from a first group of member states to take part of this EDIC, of this consortium. In the European Commission, we are expecting that other member states will join before the creation of this EPSI consortium, EDIC, by October, November 2023. And then other countries will join later in 2024. This EDIC, this consortium, will be an evolution of the current EBP, the European Blockchain Partnership, and all member states can join the EDIC as member or maybe as an observer. There will be a transition period where the European Commission will work in cooperation with the EDIC, and then the EDIC will be the main body in charge of EPSI. The European Commission is going to continue follow closely the EPSI and the EDIC, but after the establishment of the EDIC in a different role. And indeed, there will be a very important work of coordination between the different digital European program projects that are contributed to EPSI, the EDIC, and also indeed the DLT standardization tracks.
Okay. Thank you for sharing those thoughts with me, but also with us, with all the audience. And in the meantime, I saw there was another question in the chat, and Silvan already kind of replied. Thank you for that. So I believe it's already 6 minutes past the time. I think it's time to wrap up. So first of all, thank you very much for the speakers, for being with us today. Also for all the attendees who joined this webinar, taking into account what my colleague Alexandra said, it's the summer season. Thank you for being here with us. You know how to get in touch with both SEEBLOCKS and BlOCKSTAND. You can find on the chat our websites, LinkedIn, Twitter, but also pay attention to the open calls that both projects are going to open in the next weeks. And thank you very much, and touch base on the next days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Have a nice summer. Goodbye.